Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Cedarville Stories Podcast. I'm Mark Weinstein, and today's conversation with Carlos Hidalgo is powerful, personal, and deeply inspiring. Carlos, also known as Bumper, is an advisor and executive coach who spent years helping leaders define success and build meaningful lives. But on December 1st, 2025, everything changed. What began as a normal day at the gym turned into a life-threatening hemorrhagic stroke that forced him to confront his mortality, faith, and what truly matters. Let's go to my conversation with Carlos Hidalgo on this week's Cedarville Stories Podcast. Carlos, thanks for joining me this week on the Cedarville Stories Podcast. This is our first time meeting, so I'm looking forward to, I know your story, but I'm looking forward to hearing it through this podcast. And what I like to do early on the podcast with guests is, not everyone knows Carlos Hidalgo. I'm learning more about you as we speak. So for those of us, tell us about who you are, where do you live, what do you do, how has the Lord used you in recent years?
Yeah, so those who I graduated with probably know me more as Bumper than Carlos, but I use Carlos in my business setting. Bumper is a lifelong nickname. So any of my classmates who may be watching this know me more as that. So you can use either name. So I've been married to my wife, Suzanne, for just over 31 years, 31 amazing years, not without its ups and downs. And God has worked amazing things in our marriage. We actually met at Cedarville, started dating our senior year. We have 4 children that are scattered all over the country, one daughter-in-law and one soon-to-be daughter-in-law. So our family continues to expand, and we live up in the Adirondack Mountains, a little town called Schroon Lake, New York.
Yep.
And I run a advisory and coaching and speaking business.
Okay. So my first follow-up question is, how did you get the nickname Bumper?
Yeah, it really, it started when I was a baby. My mom had 4 of us pretty close together. And rather than chasing 4, she just felt it was a little more convenient to keep me in the crib. Apparently, I didn't like that. So I would bang my head against the crib. I was told sometimes it would get pretty loud. And they would say, well, there goes Bumper. And it just stuck. So I've had it as long as I can remember. And again, in business, I use Carlos. But
I would think.
Yeah, my friends know me. My friends know me as Bumper.
So when you came as a student, you introduced yourself as Bumper? Is that how they learned about it? Or how did your classmates learn about Bumper?
I just introduced myself that way.
Okay.
Just because it was all I ever knew. And even in high school, I had one 6th grade teacher who refused to call me that. But other than that, I just always grew up with it. So for me, it wasn't anything strange.
No.
It just was my name.
Yeah. You alluded to it already. I mentioned it in the introduction about basically you're an advisor, you're an executive coach. You help people in their businesses. You help executives, entrepreneurs be as fulfilled in their lives, professional lives as they can. You help leaders really define what success is. How would you define success for you, and how do you share that with your clients?
Yeah, for me, success looks like, how is God using me to advance the gospel? So
Right.
whether that's in my family, leading my family well, whether that's in my neighborhood or whether that's in the work that I do. I've never viewed the word Christian as an adjective. I'm a businessman who happens to serve Jesus.
Yeah.
So however I can further the gospel, that's success for me. The strength of my marriage is also another indicator of success. How am I doing loving my wife as Christ loved his church?
Yes.
So, and I also look at my relationships. How are my relationships? Are they strong? Are they life-giving? Am I building into them as much as they're building into me? So from that aspect, from a more of a personal aspect, that's how I define success. Obviously, from a business perspective, I define success is, am I doing the right things in business? And am I making enough to live the life that I want to live? I don't need to build an empire. If that's what some people want to do, great for them. But for me, I tried that. I went after that for years. And the old adage of you're climbing that ladder and there's no worse feeling to realize once you've reached the top that it was leaning against the wrong wall.
Right.
So I just redefined success.
Yeah.
And I ask my clients, if they were given that opportunity, how would they define success? What does that look like for them? And then we start to sort through that and try to build a plan to get them to that place.
I think what you outlined is so common in today's American culture. We always want the bigger, the better, the best, more money, whatever it is, whatever that ladder is leaning toward. And it can be challenging. And at a time, I guess it can be fun, but it's a dead end.
Yeah, it is a dead end. And again, I think if that's what people are going after and they're committed to that and they really feel that's what God has called them to, I'm not going to sit here and judge that.
No, right.
But for me, I do think you're exactly right. And I actually wrote a book about that called The Un-American Dream, where it's this hustle, this success, this, got to have more, got to do more. And the real question is why? We can't take it with us.
Right.
And so for me, I just say, what is the life that Suzanne and I want to live? Especially now that we're empty nesters, what does that look like? And then what do I have to do to make that happen? Understanding that God is going to do what he wants to do, and that life is not always up and to the right.
So I asked you earlier about defining the word success. Now, on December 1st, 2025, you had a hemorrhagic stroke. So I'm curious, before we get into that part of the story, had you defined success the same way as you define success now, or did that stroke play a role in shaping your mind in a different direction?
No, the stroke actually made me more resolved to stick to my definition.
Okay.
Because of what I had gone through a decade ago, where my life completely fell apart. The everything that I knew, everything I had clung to, everything I had worked for, due to my own choices, was just decimated. And so because of that, the stroke that I suffered, my wife and I talk about, this is the second hardest thing we've ever had to deal with because of what God did in our lives a decade earlier. And so for me, the definition of success came from that experience a decade ago. And so now it just made me even more resolved to say, yeah, this is exactly where I need to be. And this is how I want God to be able to use me if that's what he wants. He can change it at any time.
Yeah. So in a very real way, he prepared you for the stroke a decade earlier with whatever you were dealing with, that doesn't necessarily make it easier when you're dealing with the stroke, but it prepared you for it.
Very much so. We as my wife likes to say, we had our Red Sea moment. And so this was a little bit easier to handle in many ways.
Yeah. So take us back to December 1st, 2025. You're at the gym, you were working out, things were going great. Did you know you were having a stroke? What was going on?
Yeah, so we live in a pretty remote place. Our church has a community center, so I was the only one in there. And I was just in between sets, taking a little rest. And as you just said, 1 second I was feeling great, and then the next second it was like a bomb went off in my head. I've never experienced anything like it. Hope I never do.
Yeah.
I didn't know at the point. Your first thought isn't, oh my word, I'm having a stroke. So no. I literally went down to all fours, laid down, thinking I must have pinched a nerve or done something to cause this violent pounding in my head. So I made my way out to my truck, and we're only 4 miles away from where the gym is. And I started to drive home, called my wife, said, I don't know what's going on, but I'm coming home. I'm going to try to sleep this off, give me some Motrin, and hopefully this will pass. And about halfway, I passed a friend on the road, and Suzanne was still on the phone with me. And I said, hey, I just passed Dan, and it's like the whole left side of his truck wasn't even there. I said, I just can't see it. But that's when we kind of knew, all right, this is a little bit more. So I drove to our little clinic here, our health clinic in town. And as I walked in up to the main desk, they shouted back. I must have looked terrible, but they shouted back, call the ambulance.
Right away.
And Suzanne met me there. They didn't even get me out of the wheelchair. They just kind of waited for the ambulance. And I still had no clue what was going on. They had no clue what was going on. So that was my first trip. Went down to a hospital in a little town called Glens Falls, about 45 minutes from here. They did a CT scan and an MRI. Actually misdiagnosed me, told me I had a burst aneurysm, but because there was a bleed on the brain, that's when they life flighted me to Albany. And that's when I was diagnosed with the hemorrhagic stroke.
So as you were driving, first, I wouldn't recommend anyone drive themselves to a hospital if they're having a stroke, right?
Not my best move.
But you didn't know,
not my
right?
best move.
But you didn't know.
Yeah.
So
I had no clue.
So when you mentioned you passed Dan and you saw only half of his truck, did that communicate a more serious situation going on, or were you just trying to get either home or to the medical center?
It definitely elevated my awareness that something more was going on because I couldn't really see at it. They call it a field cut. It's kind of like your vision is cut in half, and that's what happened to me. So it definitely indicated it's something, but I still didn't understand the severity of it. Hemorrhagic strokes, I found out later, only account for about 13% of all strokes in the world. And they're actually the survival rate is 50% up until 2 weeks after. So I didn't understand just how severe, and even in the ambulance, because they couldn't really diagnose, they just kept saying, we're going to get you to the hospital, we'll run some tests. So it was a while, and then they were just pumping me full of pain medication. So I wasn't altogether lucid. And there's a lot of hours during that time that I just had no recollection of.
So how long did it take them to diagnose your stroke? And how long were you in the hospital?
In terms of how long, I remember I was in Albany. So I think this was probably 5-6 hours later is when a doctor came in and asked me, do you know what happened to you? And I said, well, I've been told burst aneurysm. I've been told brain bleed. I've been told stroke. He said, you're 2 for 3. There's no aneurysm. You had a stroke. It's a brain bleed. That's where the word hemorrhagic comes from. And then I was stayed in the hospital for 7 days.
What was that 7 days like for you and for Suzanne, as you had probably teams of medical people pouring in your room, helping, trying to resolve this?
Yeah, I can't say enough great things about the staff down there at Albany Med. The 7 days went quickly in some ways, and other ways just seemed to drag on. I actually think Suzanne had the harder part of this. I actually woke up Tuesday morning feeling great. I was kind of like, okay, I remember texting a friend saying, if there's a good kind of stroke to have, I think that's the one I had. That's how good I felt.
Really?
And they kept doing tests. Obviously, in a hospital, they keep coming in and checking on every so often. And Wednesday, I did an angiogram, and they said, hey, we're just going to keep you for another day, just in case anything, got nicked or plaque kind of broke off. Angiogram showed things. And then that Thursday morning, I had another episode very similar to the one I had that Monday.
Okay. But
it was more severe, more violent, severe chest pain, the head pounding again. And that kept me in bed for another 2.5 days. So really just wore me. I mean, I've never experienced any pain like that in my life.
Yeah.
Hope I never do again.
Right.
But it really, really wiped me out. And so it was just this up and down. I just wanted to be home, but I understood why the staff was keeping me there. And then Suzanne was trying to come back and forth. We lived 90 minutes away, staying at a hotel sometimes, staying at friends sometimes. So it was very, very challenging for her. Plus, she's seeing her husband in bed, not really knowing,
right,
what does this look like? Am I going to be a widow at 54 years old?
Yeah. So what is your medical prognosis? This is December of 2025, so we're a few months past then. Well, more than a few months past then. What's your prognosis? 50% rate of survival. You've obviously done that, exceeded that.
Yeah. Right now, I feel great. They have not been able to tell me why this happened, and they're kind of perplexed. They also can't tell me why I've had such a great recovery. I really credit it as to the power of prayer.
Yeah.
Literally, we had thousands of people around the world praying for us, people we didn't even know. I would get a text from a friend saying, hey, our entire church stopped today and prayed for you. It was just amazing to see God's people respond that way.
Yeah.
And so for me, the prognosis is just don't go lift heavy weights. I wasn't really lifting a whole lot anyway. And I have other than that, I have full clearance to do everything that I was doing before. I ran yesterday. I was at the gym again this morning before this call here, and I feel really good. Other than some short-term memory loss that I have, I still about every day have a headache, which I'm told probably at about the 6-month mark will start to wane. And just there's usually a point in the evening where I just kind of hit a wall. And I'm like, okay, I can't really do anything that matters anymore. My brain's just tired.
Yeah. So in the midst of your recovery, you told your wife, this is a win-win. That's not a typical response that maybe she wants to hear. What did you mean by that? And did that reflect that you were experiencing really God's tremendous peace during a very difficult time?
Absolutely. Mark, I can tell you there was not one moment during this time where I felt fear. And what I meant by that statement, and I was very clear, I was at least lucid enough to say, I'm strictly speaking for me, this is a win-win because I either get to see Jesus face to face, or I get more time with her and my kids. Now, I did pray a little bit. I remember about my life flight. I do remember praying, hey, God, if I'm going to die, I get to see you face to face and there'll be no greater joy. But if that's going to happen, let it happen quickly. So Suzanne doesn't have to suffer with this.
Yeah.
But I would like someday see my grandkids. I have a son getting married in July.
Yeah.
There's so much more here that I still would love to be a part of.
Right.
If you would be gracious enough to let me have that, I will serve you well.
Yeah.
And so that's the prayer that I prayed, and I was able to share that with Suzanne in the ER.
How did Suzanne respond to this is a win-win, first of all? Did she accept that with open arms, or more fear? Was there more fear in there?
No, she didn't really show fear either. She just said, yeah, I think that you're right. That is strictly from your perspective. I know what I want. But at the same time, she also had a piece that if I were to die, that this was part of God's plan. God was not broadsided by this. He wasn't asleep at the wheel. And for whatever reason, this would have been his plan. And there is comfort knowing I know where he is. There's no more pain.
Yeah.
And, this is now the situation God's put me in. But she did not exhibit any fear or feel that in any way. It was just different being on the other side. The emotional toll of watching all of this on her was far less than it was on me.
Sure. You weren't aware necessarily of the pain, that's for sure.
Right.
So obviously a situation like this can take someone, even a person with great faith, two different directions. One, it could make the person angry with God or at God, could bring someone closer. You demonstrated great faith in the hospital. You had very many meaningful conversations with nurses and doctors and caregivers. Can you share that story as you were being treated and obviously recovering?
Yeah, it was kind of constant because the staff is always changing. You have your morning shift, your afternoon shift, your night shift. So I got to know quite a few of the ones in the stroke unit there. I think the one that stands out for me is when I went down to my angiogram. The nurse that was prepping that, her name was Sam, and we just got talking. And so she had, it was around obviously December 1st, right around Christmas. She was telling me about her kids, and so I go, Mom, and she said she always finds a way for her and her kids to give back. And she said, this year we kind of been challenged. So I said, well, are you familiar with Samaritan's Purse?
Mm.
And she said, I can't believe you said that. She said, we have a recovery nurse that just got back from a Samaritan's Purse trip.
Wow.
And I said, oh, well, interesting. So we started talking about Samaritan's Purse. They ran the procedure. I go to recovery. Lo and behold, that's my nurse. The recovery nurse is the Samaritan's Purse nurse who knows a guy in my Bible study. Just a little glimpse of God saying, I'm here with you right now.
Yeah.
Sam comes in to check on me in recovery. And I just said, hey, Sam, before you leave, can I pray for you?
Mm.
So she grabbed my hand. And anytime I do that, I pray the plan of salvation so they hear it. And then I just pray that God would bless her and her children and that he would appear to them in a mighty way over Christmas.
Yeah.
And I said, amen. And she looked at me and smiled and said, you know what? You're a patient. You're not supposed to make me cry. And she walked out. I have no idea what happened to Sam. I haven't seen her since.
You haven't really?
But I do think of her. Nope, haven't seen her since. But as I think about her, I think about, Lord, please let that prayer sink into her heart.
Right.
And let that sink into her. Let her accept you, and let that be the start of a new family as her kids also come to know you. So I don't know. God will know what happens with that. And maybe someday, hopefully in a much different setting, I get to run into Sam again.
Yeah, maybe she'll hear this podcast and be moved closer to Jesus and accept him. So from a story written by Elizabeth Kuhn, she's one of the Cedarville student PR writers. She wrote the story that's generated this podcast. She mentioned just how the Cedarville community, your church community, just rallied around you and your family during this time. Speak to the value of that, how that impacted not just you, but your family and your faith in Jesus.
We're still overwhelmed. I'll tell two quick stories.
Please.
As I mentioned, the hospital's 90 minutes away from, so I was in the one hospital, then life flighted. By the time Suzanne got to the ER in Albany, there were already 8 people from our church in the waiting room.
Really?
And that, it's just like, the second one is there was a couple that also went to Cedarville. They were a year behind us. So we graduated in 93. They were 94. Jolie texted my wife over Facebook. We literally we were friendly at Cedarville, but we weren't, fast friends. And she said, hey, here's my number. Would you call me? So Suzanne calls her. Jolie tells a story about it, about me impacting her when we were at Cedarville, and says, my husband and I, Scott, we've always looked for a family to adopt at Christmas, and this year we couldn't find one, but we want you guys to be our family.
Oh, wow.
We're sending you something. So we're waiting. FedEx doesn't show up. Turns out FedEx loses what they had sent. We get a call from Jolie that Saturday morning and said, hey, we did a map. We live in New Hampshire. It's 4 hours to your house. Scott's on his way there now. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I haven't talked to you in over 3 decades since I graduated. Not anything nasty. It's just, you go your separate ways.
Right.
And he showed up at our house, delivered a check to us to help pay for the medical expenses, prayed with us, gave us a hug, and just said, it was so good to see you guys. And we're just so glad God worked this out this way.
Yeah.
So how that all translated for us, I spent more time crying in the early days of my recovery, just at the generosity of God's people and getting messages of people who are praying for us. But the way that played out, in the middle of January, I had a call with a colleague who doesn't know the Lord. We've known each other for about 20 years. Yeah. And he says to me, I got to tell you, he said, your community is amazing. And I said, what do you mean? Yeah. He said, I've been reading the comments online from people at your church, people you went to school with. He said, I've never seen anything like it. And I said, well, that's Jesus. Yeah. I said, all of us on our own, we might lend a hand. I said, but the outpouring, I said, what you're seeing is the body of Christ. Yeah. And it's all made possible because of Christ's death on the cross. Now, he didn't really want to engage in that, but it definitely got him to think. Yeah. But I just thought, how awesome is God to use a platform like Facebook to get somebody who doesn't know him to say there's something different about these people. Yeah. And I'm curious enough to mention it. So all praise to him.
Yeah, God will use anything to advance his message and his kingdom. Several weeks ago, I did a podcast. I did a 2-part series with 3 alumni who are in leadership roles at K-Love, Jim Hauser, Mandy Young, and Steve Shore.
Yeah. I know Jim. He
Jim.
Graduated a year ahead of us.
Okay, so I was down there, and I asked Jim the question, because what you just said has reminded me of this podcast. And I said, I'm not a Cedarville alum, but I see Cedarville people, supporting Cedarville people, whether they're a current student or they've been out of school for decades. Why is that? You pointed it, rightfully so, it's to Jesus, but can you put more practicality to that answer? Because Cedarville really is a special place, and this is an example of that specialness, right?
It is. I think, I tell people I went in the dark ages, over 30 years ago. But that commonality that you have, that shared experience that you had, and you could say, well, that happens at every college. It really doesn't.
It doesn't.
The students and the alum that we knew that popped out of the woodwork when they saw this on Facebook or found out through other ways, it's hard to describe. And even my friend, my colleague, my work colleague saw that. He saw the church, but also
Cedarville.
College folks and college classmates. And I just think it's a culture. I mean, when I was there, Paul Dixon was the president. Have a load of respect for him. One of the great servant leaders, at least for my money,
right?
Just in how he operated,
right?
But I think that culture and understanding that, just because you went to school here and leave doesn't mean you leave all that behind. No. There's that commonalities, there's that shared focus, and there really is a deep care and love for each other that is just rare in most places. And thankfully, we saw it in our church, and we saw it from our Cedarville community as well.
Yeah. I've heard this phrase used recently, and I don't want to minimize what you just said, but like in college basketball, I recently heard how teams that would win called their team like a brotherhood. Well, that's what you have. You have we as believers and we as Cedarville University people have a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and it's rooted in Jesus. And that's really neat that your former colleague, could see that. Even though he didn't know really what it was. That was really neat.
Right. It was so encouraging.
Yeah. So back to your recovery. If I read the story right, there was a point where you had a serious setback. What was the setback?
Yeah, that was that Thursday morning episode, which repeated all the same symptoms that I had on that Monday. And again, actually, the one that was the worst part of that was the chest pain. I found out later that where the bleed was telling the vessels in my chest to contract and push against each other. So I felt like I had an elephant sitting on my chest. I really thought I was having a heart attack with another stroke.
Right.
Until the neurologist came in, and in the middle of this, I had about 12 people in my room working on me, not knowing what was going on. And he just put his hand on my chest and said, "I'm not worried about this." And I was thinking, well, I'm glad you're not, because this stinks. This is awful. And again, the medicines that they have and everything like that, they were able to get it under control in about 30 minutes, but it was a long, violent, painful 30 minutes.
So as we move toward the end of the program, I love a phrase that I read in the story by Elizabeth about you living life with a sense of urgency, specifically biblical urgency. What does that mean to you on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I talked to one of my good friends. We've known each other since we were little kids. And I told him, this was after, I said, I'm done living on intention. So, that to me, the words, I'd meant to, like if I was going to, Mark, I've been meaning to call you. Yeah. Well, no, I haven't. If I wanted to call you, I would find time to call you.
Right.
And he was the one who said, you're actually living life now with urgency. And so for me, biblical urgency is a relentless focus on what matters.
Okay.
And for me, that's asking the Lord, put things in my path, give me the wisdom and discernment to really understand, even in my workday, where do I need to put my attention? Where do I need to put my focus?
Yeah.
Is a conversation with a neighbor more important than building another presentation or writing another speech? So give me that. And then it's also, I am kind of using it to my advantage, saying, hey, I almost died, so I'm going to say what I need to say. And so an urgency of sharing the gospel with as many people as possible, because we don't know how long we have. And so I live that in spades. So I'm going to share that, and every opportunity I get, I'm going to use whatever platform I can to share his goodness and his truth.
So as we think through your story and that phrase of biblical urgency, can you put into words a recent example where you have exercised biblical urgency in your life somehow, some way?
Yeah, I was just talking to an individual in business, and typically, like I said, I don't believe Christian is an adjective. So if you go to my website, you're not going to see Bible verses or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it was a prospect, and he said, "So tell me about yourself." Now, here's a guy, I'm trying to win his business.
Right.
And I said, well, first and foremost, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, and he's the one that I serve each and every day. I said, now, you may not ascribe to that, which is fine, but if we're going to work together, you need to know who you're getting and what my operating system is.
Yeah.
I said, and so for everything that he's done for me, I serve him. And that is my operating system that I operate by. So I think it's important for you to know that. What was really interesting, this gentleman doesn't know the Lord. He kind of smiled and he said, I was not expecting that as an answer, but I think I like it. And so then we got on to talking about business and things like that. But for me, it's just another opportunity to put out there who I am, why I am the way I am, and talk about the one that I serve. Because again, we don't know, for all I know, he's going home really thinking through that and starting to investigate. And hopefully we get a chance to work together and I get to share more with him.
Let me close today's podcast with one main question. So for someone watching and listening to this program who keeps putting things off, what would you say to them?
I would say, don't. It's so easy to get into coast mode. It's so easy to get into a rut. It's so easy to live on the promise of someday. As my wife likes to say, Sunday is not a day in the week. God has called us to today. We are not guaranteed it tomorrow. We know there's going to be trials and suffering in our lives. James tells us that in James 2.
Yeah.
But we should be finding joy. And so I would encourage anybody who feels stuck or in that rut or kind of putting off whatever they know they should be doing, is God has not guaranteed you anything. Yeah. And so what he has called you to is to serve him in both the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
And when you do that, the peace that you have and the peace that we experienced is unlike anything. I mean, truly, it's the peace that surpasses all understanding. And so I would say to, first of all, confess that to the Lord and then get after it.
Great advice. I want to end on this last question, though. I want to put practicality to what you just said. What is one way someone can start today to live urgently with a sense of urgency?
I'm going to focus on those of us who are married because my wife and I do marriage retreats. I would say for men, step into the beautiful calling that God has called you to lead your homes, to love your wife as Christ loved his church, and start doing that today and do it every day. Because I believe fundamentally, if just in the Christian church, we took that call and that command seriously, our society would look really different.
Yeah.
And in the work that I've done with men and in the work that I've done with executives, I just see this complacency. And so for me, the practical way is, again, confess to the Lord and just say, today I'm going to start leading my home the way God wants me to lead it, and watch what happens. It is truly transformational.
Great advice that we all can heed. So, Bumper, I really did enjoy this conversation. It went by really quickly. I'm glad that you are in good health. I'm excited to hear how you are serving Jesus through your work and through your life. So thanks for all what you shared. Thanks for joining me this week on the Cedarville Stories Podcast. It's great to be with you. Thank you for listening to the Cedarville Stories Podcast, brought to you by Cedarville University. To learn more about Cedarville University, visit our website at cedarville.edu. And be sure to come back next week when we'll share another Cedarville story for God's glory.